Welcome to the first of 4 lecture videos about child abuse. This is a very difficult topic, but it has to be covered. It's my least favorite lecture. Child abuse is very non-discriminatory. It occurs anywhere. So if you think in your neighborhood that abuse is not to be found, you have blinders on. It's wishful thinking. Because behind closed doors somewhere, a child, a woman, a man is being abused. This lecture only addresses those for children. You have a legal duty to report suspected child abuse, and there are fines, including imprisonment, for failure to report. Be careful of surface appearances. All may not be as well as it is portrayed. So if you are suspicious, if you have the slightest inkling that something could be wrong, either report yourself or get someone else in, take a look at the picture, and decide if something is looking out of the ordinary. And what you want to look for is suspicious physical or psychological signs that could be indicative of abuse. Remember, these kids may be looking at you as the savior. I posted a document on Blackboard that came from the CDC, and it gives the latest facts about child abuse. The most current statistics are from 2014. Do remember that child abuse is broken trust. The biggest myth is that the dangers that occur to a child are coming from strangers. But as you review the statistics, it comes from people who this child knows, and usually knows well. Do you remember the family that's portrayed on the right? I don't have all 5 of her children in here, but this woman drowned all 5 of her children in the bathtub, starting with the youngest. And so the older children had to witness what she was doing to these younger children. There are primarily 4 types of abuse: physical, emotional, sexual, and neglect. Unfortunately, a child can be the victim of all 4. And I don't know how, with physical, sexual, and neglect, that there would not be an emotional component. So here are the legal definitions of child abuse or neglect. And whenever there is a case, we only need the minimum that is stated in the law. You don't have to have everything. So abuse or neglect is any recent act or a failure to act. And as a result, there is imminent risk of serious harm, death, serious physical or emotional harm, sexual abuse, or exploitation of a child who is defined under the age of 18 years or younger, and it is by a parent or a caretaker who is responsible for the welfare of this child. Further definitions include sexual abuse, which is inappropriate adolescent or sexual behavior with a child. Emotional is a pattern of behavior that impairs a child's emotional development or self-worth. So examples of this are constant criticism, the child who is never good enough, threats, rejection, as well as withholding love, support, and guidance. We know it happens, but it's very difficult to prove. Sexual abuse can also be broadened into employment, use, persuasion, inducement, enticement, or coercion of any child to engage in or assist another person to engage in sexually explicit conduct, or a simulation of such type of conduct for the purpose of producing any visual depiction of such conduct. And then we have rape. And in the cases of caretaker or interfamilial relationships, we call that statutory rape. There can be molestation, they can be put up for prostitution, or any other form of sexual exploitation of children, including incest with children. And when you look at our world that is now full of social media, our children who are online unsupervised are prey for abusers. When should you suspect? Well, many victims and caregivers will bring a child in and explain how the injuries are accidental. But you get the story, the doctor gets the story, the clerk gets the story, and it's inconsistent. It's not only inconsistent in what they're telling you, but what they're telling you isn't consistent with the injury that you're looking at. Another thing that you might notice is that this child appears anxious. Why? Because they fear that there will be retribution if they tell us what's going on. But the other fear is this parent may be in trouble because of what they did. Other things that you might see are the psychosocial aspects, apathy, passiveness, and lack of appropriate protest when you know developmentally that this kid should be fighting you, even if it's to take a blood pressure. But this kid has been abused so much, there's no longer a fight in them because they know if they do fight, somebody's going to hurt them. They may just look withdrawn, have a vacant stare. They don't care where they are because they know wherever they are, they're going to have harm. On the opposite side, we can have kids who are overly aggressive or having inappropriate behavior or inappropriate language because that is all they have ever known. Some kids may have difficulty with relationships, and this may be in school, maybe with other friends, being with other family members. Now, there's going to be a variety of slides that I'm going to show, and they're going to be disturbing. But what you need to look at are unexplained suspicious injuries. Characteristic burns, lacerations, bruises, dislocations, and fractures that typically end up being an abusive pattern. The child who's brought in with frequent accidents are described as being so accident prone. In addition, we see bruises in a variety of stages of healing. So let's start taking a look. But what I want you to be familiar with is what you're looking for and what you're looking at. When you look at all three pictures, it looks like there's a lot of bruising on each one of these children's skin. But the only one that has true bruising is the one on the lower left. The one on the upper right is coining. And what this is in the Asian population, they use a hot coin that is large. Sometimes it isn't hot, but they literally take this and they press it very deeply onto the skin. And the purpose is to make whatever illness the child has, or possibly their behavior, go away. When you look at the bottom picture, there looks like there's a variety of bruises across this child's back as well as on the sacrum. But these aren't bruises at all. These are what we call Mongolian spots, and they are born with that. So you have to be careful with what you're looking at. The child on the left, obvious bruises, and you can actually see the outline of a hand and the fingerprint. Look at the different objects that adults use to inflict injury. Belts, hairbrushes, spoons, looped cords, belt buckles, and then we have cigarette lighters, cigarette burns, curling irons, light bulbs, irons, and then, believe it or not, we have people who immerse their children in scalding water. This is a child's lower extremities, and just above the ankle, you see this band of tissue. It's actually a result of being restrained. And as the child was trying to escape, whatever they were being restrained with cut into the skin. This is real bruising in a variety of stages of healing. And the one that's on the left, the far left, as you're looking at it, the picture's not the greatest, but that's the most recent. And then all of the ones that are across the top of the abdomen are in stages of healing. And you can see how the genitalia is significantly bruised. This is a spiral fracture of the femur. It's very difficult to break the femur as it is the strongest bone in our body. This type of injury typically occurs in an abusive situation as the parent is grabbing onto the extremity and twisting, and as a result, you see how there are spikes in the break on the proximal and the distal ends, and they're usually opposite one another. It takes a profound amount of force to cause this type of fracture. And for this reason, when we see this type of fracture, it's child abuse until proven otherwise. We'll take this kid into protective custody. This is a poor child who was immersed into scalding water. We have a glove pattern and we have a sock pattern, and that's what this is. The gloved pattern is when they immerse the child in with their hands. And last but not least, the top right is an example of a small child who was burned with cigarettes. Somebody purposely took cigarette butts, well, not butts, but a burning cigarette, and burned this child. And it looks like there's some other evidence of burn, as if this child was trying to get away from it. And then on the left, we have facial trauma that left a very evident bruise. So this ends the first part of 4 lectures on child abuse and neglect.